The first time Ryan's name appeared at the bottom of the class rankings, he laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he didn't know how else to react. It felt surreal, like the number next to his name wasn't his. After all, he tried. Didn't he? Well, maybe not enough, but still, dead last. He crumpled the sheet and shoved it deep into his backpack before his classmates could see. That day, he skipped lunch and sat alone in the library, pretending to read he didn't want to answer questions or meet eyes with anyone who had done better. The truth was, Ryan wasn't dumb. He knew that. But over the past year, life had become heavier. His parents had separated, and between late-night arguments and shuffling between two homes, school felt like a burden rather than a priority. No one knew what was going on at home. He didn't tell his teachers, and he avoided his friends when things got too personal. The mask he wore every day, a carefree smile and jokes to hide his struggles, was starting to crack. And when that report card came in, it shattered completely. That evening, sitting at his desk in a room he barely recognized as his own, Ryan stared blankly at his open notebook. He hadn't written anything. His math homework sat untouched. He told himself he would do it later, just like he had the night before, and the night before that, but later never came. The page stayed blank for a few days. Ryan drifted. He walked through hallways like a ghost, present but invisible. Teachers noticed. A few even called on him more often, maybe to jolt him back into focus. But the more they did, the more embarrassed he felt. One afternoon, his English teacher, Mrs. Garcia, asked him to stay after class. She was kind and soft-spoken, with warm eyes and a calm voice that reminded him of better times. "Ryan," she said gently, "I noticed you haven't turned in the last two essays. Is everything all right?" He hesitated. "Yeah, just been tired." She didn't press further. Instead, she handed him a copy of a short story, The Last Leaf by O. Henry. "Take this home. Read it when you get the chance. I think you will like it." He shoved it into his backpack without a second thought, but later that night, unable to sleep, he pulled it out. The story was simple, about hope and sacrifice, about how even in the darkest moments, something or someone could keep you going. It wasn't earth-shattering, but it stayed with him. The next day, for the first time in weeks, he raised his hand in class. It was just a small comment, a quick answer about symbolism. But it made Mrs. Garcia smile, and that smile, it meant something. It told Ryan that someone still believed in him. That evening, he went back to the library. He didn't have a plan. He just sat down, opened his math book, and tried to understand a single problem. It took him 30 minutes to get through it, but he did. And that tiny victory felt like lifting a mountain. From that day on, Ryan decided he wouldn't aim for perfection. He would aim for effort. Every night, he set a timer for 25 minutes, just 25, and promised himself he would focus on studying during that time. No phone, no distractions, just him and the page. Sometimes he managed only 15. Sometimes he zoned out, but he kept coming back. He also began asking questions in class. At first, his voice trembled. Some classmates looked surprised, some even laughed, but over time, the laughter faded, and the surprise turned into nods of respect. His teachers noticed. They encouraged him. Even the strict math teacher, Mr. Tanaka, started leaving small good work notes on his quizzes. It wasn't a straight climb. Ryan still failed some tests. He still had days when he wanted to quit, but he no longer saw failure as final. It was part of the journey, not the end of it. He began seeing school not as a burden, but as a challenge. A puzzle, a game where he could improve a little each day. He created flashcards, joined a study group, and watched online videos to help with topics he didn't understand. He also learned how to say, "I don't get it," without shame. That, in itself, was a massive win. One day, during a science quiz, something incredible happened. As he flipped through the pages, he realized he knew the answers, not just vaguely. He actually knew them. The diagrams, the definitions, the processes, it all flowed. When he turned in his paper, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: pride. When the results came back, Ryan had scored 91%. It wasn't perfect, but it was the highest he'd ever gotten. He showed it to his mom that evening, and she hugged him tighter than she had in months. They both cried. Silently, that score was a turning point. He stuck the paper on the fridge. Every time he walked past it, it reminded him that effort mattered. That small steps led to big changes, and that he wasn't a failure, he had just needed time. But change comes with new challenges. With his rising scores came higher expectations. Now people noticed him not as the boy who failed, but as the student who turned things around. And that attention was scary. He started comparing himself to others. He felt pressure to keep improving, to not fall back. There were nights when he stayed up till late studying, chasing perfect scores, forgetting to take breaks, forgetting to breathe. His teachers praised him, but he began to feel hollow. Mrs. Garcia noticed again. After class one day, she gently pulled him aside. "You're doing amazing, Ryan. But remember, even the best runners need to rest." He nodded, and this time, he listened. He began balancing his time, walking outside, listening to music, drawing again, something he used to love. Those moments recharged him, helped him think clearly, and reminded him that success wasn't just about numbers, it was about peace of mind. By the time the final exams arrived, Ryan wasn't nervous. He was ready, not because he had all the answers, but because he had built habits, resilience, and belief in himself. When the results came in a few weeks later, he stared at the screen in disbelief. He had placed in the top 5 of his class, from the bottom to the top 5. The same classmates who once ignored him now asked for help. One of them even said, "You're like a genius now." Ryan laughed. "Nah, I just stopped giving up." But deep down, he knew it was more than that. It was every small decision, every late-night study session, every question he dared to ask, every time he refused to quit that brought him here. Ryan's success spread across school like wildfire. Teachers began mentioning his name in class. As an example of what persistence could do, a few even asked him to share his methods with struggling students. At first, he felt awkward about it. After all, he still saw himself as the underdog. But one afternoon, he stayed behind to help. Jason, a quiet boy who was always doodling and rarely paid attention. They sat together for just 30 minutes, going over a few algebra problems. Jason barely spoke at first, but Ryan encouraged him gently, remembering how fragile he himself had once been. By the end of the session, Jason managed to solve a question on his own. The way his eyes lit up that single moment sparked something in Ryan. Helping others wasn't just a duty. It gave his journey meaning, so he kept doing it. He started volunteering during peer study sessions, explaining topics in simple language, drawing diagrams, and sharing his flashcards. He didn't want praise or attention. He just remembered how alone it felt when he was at the bottom, and he didn't want anyone else to feel that way. However, as Ryan rose, so did the pressure. People expected him to be perfect. There were whispers of "he's got it easy now," and of course, "he'll top the test." What no one saw were the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, the quiet tears when he missed a mark despite trying his hardest. During the final semester of his last year in school, Ryan faced a serious hurdle. His father, who had moved to another city after the separation, was hospitalized. Ryan had to travel frequently, juggling schoolwork with emotional stress and family responsibilities. He spent nights sleeping on hospital couches and days catching up on assignments in waiting rooms. His grades began to slip. For the first time in a year, he felt like he was falling again. One day, after failing a physics test, Ryan sat alone under the big acacia tree behind the school. His old self tried to whisper cruel things. "See, it was just luck. You're not really smart. You were never meant to succeed." But then he remembered something. He pulled out a tattered notebook from his bag, the same one he had used when he first decided to turn things around. Inside were pages filled with problems, answers, diagrams, motivational quotes, and even scribbled notes from teachers. One quote stood out, underlined in bold. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be better than yesterday." That night, he didn't study. He didn't force himself to solve equations or read chapters. Instead, he breathed. He allowed himself to cry. And then, slowly, he picked up the phone and messaged, "Mrs. Garcia, I'm struggling again." "I don't want to fall," she replied within minutes. "You're not falling, Ryan. You're climbing a bigger mountain. And every step, even the hard ones, still counts." With that support, Ryan adjusted. He asked for extensions, communicated with teachers, and gave himself grace. He studied in bursts, stayed organized with to-do lists, and leaned on his friends for help. The same friends who once didn't notice him now sat beside him, explaining concepts and offering quiet encouragement. And somehow, through it all, he kept going. The final exams were intense. Students around him were anxious, and some even broke. Under the pressure, Ryan, though nervous, stayed calm. He didn't try to memorize everything. Instead, he focused on understanding. He approached each subject not as a hurdle, but as a challenge he was ready for. He even created a small mantra he whispered before every paper: "I've done my best. That's enough." When the results were finally released, Ryan stood frozen in the hallway, surrounded by classmates refreshing the online portal. His heart pounded as he entered his credentials. There it was, rank number 1. For a moment, everything went silent. He stared at the screen, blinking. Was this real? He scrolled down. Every subject, every single one, and not just A's top percentile in nearly every category. A lump formed in his throat. People began cheering around him. Someone clapped him on the back, someone else hugged him. But Ryan just smiled softly, as if sharing a private conversation with his past self, the boy who once sat in the library pretending to read, hiding a failed report card in his bag. He didn't cry that day. He didn't scream or jump in celebration. He just walked home quietly with a kind of peace he had never known before. At dinner that night, his mom made his favorite dish. His dad, now recovering, called with pride in his voice, and Mrs. Garcia sent him a simple message: "I knew you could. And more importantly, you knew it too." Graduation day came, and Ryan stood on stage to give the valedictorian speech. He wore a crisp navy blazer, but his voice trembled slightly as he stepped up to the podium. He looked out at the sea of students, teachers, and parents, and for a moment, he wasn't the top student. He was the boy who had once sat at the bottom of the class. He began his speech not with a quote, but with a confession. "I failed many times. I've been the worst student in the class. I've hidden grades, lied about homework, and felt like giving up more times than I can count. But what changed everything for me wasn't luck. It wasn't magic. It was effort. It was asking for help. It was believing, even when I was at my lowest, that I could still rise." The room was silent. If you're sitting here thinking you're not good enough, that you're not smart enough, I'm telling you now, that's not true. You can fall, you can struggle. But what matters is that you stand up again, even if it's slow, even if it's messy. Keep standing. He ended his speech with a smile, eyes glistening. "I was once the student everyone thought would never make it. Now I stand here because I chose not to quit. So if I can do it, so can you." The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, dozens of students came up to thank him. Some were younger kids who had heard of his turnaround. Others were classmates who'd secretly been inspired by his journey. One girl, teary-eyed, said, "I was thinking of dropping out, but your story changed my mind." Ryan hugged her and said simply, "Don't give up. It gets better." And as the sun set that day, Ryan walked away from school not just as a top student, but as a symbol of hope. The moral: failure isn't the end, it's the beginning of something incredible if you choose to keep going.